Stand, please. Lord, we ask that you guide us in our decision-making, protect us and the community we serve from all that is evil, and strengthen our unity for the welfare of the city. Amen. Amen. I would like to acknowledge the Wiradjuri people as the traditional custodians of the land that we meet upon today, and pay my respects to the elders past, present and future, for they hold the memories, culture, tradition and hopes of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people that contribute to our community. Thank you. CM2, this council meeting is being webcast and recorded. By speaking at the council meeting, you agree to being recorded and webcast. Please ensure that if and when you are speaking at this council meeting that you are respectful to other people and use appropriate language. AlburyCity accepts no liability for any defamatory or offensive remarks or gestures made during the course of this council meeting. An audio recording will be made for administrative purposes. Conflict of interest declarations, I've received none. Mr Zachnich.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. This advice to the council meeting relates to disclosure of political donations and requirements of the Environmental Planning and Assessment Act. So the Act under section 10.4 requires a person submitting planning applications or submissions regarding a planning application to disclose any reportable political donation and or gifts to any local councillor or employee of council. Reportable political donations include those of or above $1,000. The disclosure statement forms are available on Council's website or from the Customer Service Centre and must be lodged in accordance with the Act. The forms are also available at the back of the chamber during meetings. In dealing with development applications, councillors need to take into account specific matters contained in the Environmental Planning and Assessment Act. Accordingly, the provisions of section 4.151 of that Act are set out in the Council Officer's report detailing issues to be considered. The Local Government Act, section 375A, requires that a division be called whenever a motion for a planning decision is put at a meeting of the Council. Planning decision means a decision made in the exercise of a function of Council under the Environmental Planning and Assessment Act, including a decision relating to a development application, an environmental planning instrument, a development control plan or a development contribution plan under that Act, but not including the making of an order under Division 9.3 of Part 9 of that Act. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Mr Zachnich. CM4, the apologies, thanks. Thank you, councillors. Councillor Thurley.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I move that Council receive note and accept the apology of Councillor King and grant leave of absence for the meeting.
Thank you. Councillor Doxey.
Happy to second, Mr Mayor.
No questions or debate. Happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. We have no mayoral minute. Action plan 6.1 to 6.4. Thank you, councillors. Councillor Stutchbury.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I move that the following action plans be received and noted. 1. Actions complete for noting only. 2. Actions awaiting response from external parties. 3. Actions in progress. And 4. Long-term issues more than 3 months.
Thank you. Councillor Doxey.
Happy to second, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Stutchbury, do you wish to speak to that at all?
No, thank you.
Thank you. I have a question from Councillor Vanderman. Councillor Vanderman.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I didn't, must admit, I didn't read the issues, the action plans in detail. But is the Swift Street pedestrian crossing on the action plans? And if it is, I don't believe we've seen any action yet around making the parking 1 hour zone, which I believe we agreed was possible prior to any report coming to council around the CBD parking strategy.
Mr Ferris.
Through you, Mr Mayor, the parking strategy will be presented to Council at the October pre-meeting briefing session for Council's consideration, and we can then progress from there.
Okay.
Comfortable? Yep.
Thank you.
Okay. No further questions. I'm happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. Confirmation of minutes of previous meeting. Thanks. Councillor Thurley.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I move that the minutes of the council meeting held on Monday the 9th of September at 6 p.m. be confirmed.
Thank you. Councillor Stutchbury.
Second that, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Thurley, just to open debate or discuss?
No,
the
thank you,
matter?
Mr Mayor.
Being no further debate, I'm happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. CM8, there are no reports from community forums. There are no notice of motion. CM10, no presentations, deputations, minutes of working parties and committees. And 11.1 minutes of the Sports Albury Advisory Committee. Councillor Vandervan?
Happy to move that the minutes recommendations of the Sports Albury Advisory Committee meeting held on Wednesday, 21st of August 2019 be received, noted and accepted.
Thank you. Councillor Doxey?
Happy to second, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Vandervan, do you wish to speak to that?
No, thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. I'll only just mention that there's been a surprising number of sponsorship applications come through, and it's great to see that we've found another way of supporting our young people, and your committee's to be commended. So I'm happy to put that motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. 11.2, the minutes of the Murray-Darling Association. Councillor Thurley.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I move that the minutes and recommendations of the Murray-Darling Association Region 1 meeting held on Friday 23rd of August 2019 be received, noted and accepted.
Thank you. Councillor Clacken.
Happy to second that.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley, did you wish to open debate?
I'd just like to briefly mention one thing, and it's particularly appropriate given Eli's address to Council. The speaker at that meeting was Dr Lynette Bettillo, from a senior climatologist from the Bureau of Meteorology, and I'd have to say she painted a pretty grim picture of the year ahead for the whole of Australia. She was speaking in particular about the Murray-Darling Basin. The outlook is certainly for drier, hotter conditions, and starting from a very low base of soil moisture, we're looking at a pretty grim season ahead. And if you think it's going to be grim in the Murray-Darling Basin, the whole of Western Australia is looking pretty sad too. She did brief us on what's called the Indian Ocean Dipole, which is something that forms and affects the weather and where the fronts move. So I think it's a pretty grim picture, and will need a lot of work by rural and regional communities to get through this next year or so. So, yeah, that'll do me.
Thank you, Councillor Thurley. Happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. 11.3, the minutes of the Sustainability Advisory Committee. Councillor Thurley.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I move that the minutes and recommendations of the Sustainability Advisory Committee meeting held on Tuesday, 3rd of September be received, noted and accepted.
Councillor Con.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Happy to second.
Councillor Thurley, do you wish to open debate on that one?
There's a couple of things I'd just like to mention. One's a very public thing about the Wildflower Walk, which is going to be held later this month. The other issue that the committee talked about was having the issue of climate risk be included as a risk factor in all council reports, so that if climate has any bearing on the matter being discussed, then the risk of climate change and the effects of climate change should be noted in reports. And I guess the only other thing I'd like to note, the committee itself noted the work of Matthew Dudley, who is leaving council, or has left council. His work on the SAC for many years, in fact all of the years I've been on it, Matthew was there too. So we appreciate his contribution, and we wish him well for the future.
Thank you. I'll reiterate that point. Thank you, Councillor Thurley. I'm happy to put that motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. Minutes of the Albury Airport Users Advisory Committee. Councillor Clacken.
Thank you. Through you to move the recommendation of the motion that the minutes recommendations of the Albury Airport Users Advisory Committee meeting held on Wednesday, the 4th of September 2019 be received, noted and accepted. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Doxey.
Happy to second, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Glacken, do you wish to open debate on that one?
No, thank you.
No questions or debate. Happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. CM12, documents for sealing. Thank you, councillors. Councillor Vandervan.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll move the recommendation of the motion that Council authorises the seal to be affixed to the documents outlined below in the presence of two signatories authorised to affix the seal pursuant to Regulation 400 of the Local Government General Regulation 2005 and the Council seal and management of legal documents and advice procedure. A. AlburyCity lease to Lavington Occasional Childcare Association Incorporated of 466 Breen Street, Lavington, for 5 years with a 5-year option commencing 1 November 2019, FIL 09/01785, and B, low-cost loans initiative funding agreements between the New South Wales Government and AlburyCity for Thurgoona Willinga Growth Precinct 10-year loan of $9,660,000, FIL 18/01966.
Thank you. Councillor Salisbury.
Second, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Van Andrews to speak to that.
Only very briefly, Mr Mayor, and that is the second item, obviously is very important for us from the point of view of enabling us to start with some of the infrastructures that we need in that particular area. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley, you wish to speak for that motion?
I think I'm...
Okay. No further speakers. I'm happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. 13.1, Corporate Success Pillars Draft Measures, Officers' Reports for consideration. Thank you. Councillor Con.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I move, and noting that this is an alternate motion to the recommendation in the agenda, that Council A receive and note the measures and 2019-20 targets proposed for the 6 corporate success pillars. B, endorse the reporting against the corporate success pillars to occur at the completion of the 2019-20 financial year. C, that staff, in consultation with the Energy and Sustainability Officer, the Sustainability Advisory Committee, the Youth Council and our Cities Power Partnership Partner Councils, 1, prepare a report to Council by no later than June 2020 that sets ambitious carbon intensity reduction targets for 2025, 2030 and 2050. 2, develop mitigation measures to offset our AlburyCity emissions in addition to current efforts with an implementation schedule for each to inform the budget development process. And D, that carbon intensity calculations include emissions from all sources, including emissions by HVAC equipment and land use change.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley.
I second the motion, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Con, do you wish to open debate?
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. Firstly, I wanted to congratulate Eli for speaking to us tonight. I remember being in Year 9, I was pretty focused on my schoolwork and sport and perhaps getting my L's, and I certainly wasn't addressing my local council, and I think you did really well. Look, the issue of carbon targets for the council has been discussed at the Sustainability Advisory Committee for as long as I've been on council, and Councillor Thurley, I think, will attest for longer than I've been on council. It's topical. We obviously had huge strikes across the country on Friday about this issue. What the federal government does is obviously outside of our control, but what I'm proposing tonight is within our control. I think AlburyCity has some existing plans in place that will be beneficial from this point of view. I think our halve waste program and the upcoming commercial green waste collection will make a difference. I think changing our street lights to LED lighting will make a difference, and I think our energy savings action plan will make a difference. But I also think that we can do better. The target that was proposed in the report is simply a reduction in carbon footprint per resident year on year. What I'm hearing from our community loud and clear is that they want us to set a stronger target than this. Look, my personal view is that we should be setting a year for a net zero target like Byron Shire Council did. Other councils like Eurobadalla have set an 80% carbon footprint reduction, but this motion isn't me setting my own target. It's suggesting that we make a commitment to do better and we talk to the right people about how to do that, being our partner councils in the Cities Power Partnership, the Sustainability Advisory Committee that we've set up with local environmental experts, and the Youth Council, because they've shown a really keen interest this year in this issue, and I believe we should be harnessing their energy, their knowledge and their creativity. I've got some ideas of mitigation measures that we could take. I think that our urban forest strategy and the environmental lands that we've been given from the New South Wales Government provide a really cool opportunity to do revegetation and create carbon sinks that way. But again, this motion isn't proposing those ideas because it's not about my ideas. It's suggesting that we set a target that is both ambitious and achievable, that we speak to the right people about how to get it done, and I urge my fellow councillors to support the motion tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Con. I have a question before I take further debate. Councillor Vanderbilt.
Through you, Mr Mayor, to Councillor Con, you actually just basically summed up my concern about this. Ambitious and achievable, in my view, are a bit at odds with each other. I would have thought that achievable carbon intensity reduction targets would be a more appropriate wording for this particular motion than ambitious. Wonder if Councillor Con would consider changing that one word in the in that particular motion.
Councillor Con.
Thanks, Councillor Van der Ven, for the comment. I won't change the wording in that tonight. My understanding is that in preparing this report in consultation with all those people that we would be identifying achievable targets. And I truly believe that targets can be both ambitious and achievable. I've had a look at Eurobadala Council's website. They've made a commitment to reduce their carbon footprint by 80%, and they've written an extensive carbon footprint reduction strategy. I think if we work with those cities power partnership councils, we can learn how they're achieving those things and set a target that is both.
What about ambitious and achievable?
Sure.
There you go. Is Howard comfortable with that, Councillor Manning?
To me, I can't see the point in setting a... Sorry, Mr Mayor, if I...
Yep. Sorry.
Continue. So I can't see the point in setting an ambitious target that's not achievable.
Yeah.
So I'd rather put something in there that says... It's like you're setting out to fail to a certain extent, by setting ambitious targets. So I would be happy with ambitious and achievable.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley, are you comfortable with that?
Yes, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. So we can just adjust that to ambitious and achievable. We've done that. Excellent. Councillor Thurley, you were the next queue in the seeking
Thank you,
for.
Mr Mayor. I'd support the motion. This council has done already quite a lot, and I would refer to the councillor sitting beside me, Councillor Van der Ven. We pushed very hard for fast implementation of solar cells on council buildings and so on, and that was ambitious, and it was achieved. I think we need to look and see what else we can do. I don't see any problem with this motion, and part of it comes from the Sustainability Committee. They want to see things happen, and Councillor Connor's correct. A previous member of the SAC has advocated for many years for doing more and doing better in this space. I believe we can. I have never been comfortable with the idea of declaring climate emergencies. I'd rather see concrete action, and that's what this motion looks to. How to get things happening rather than simply words and policies, and I'm very comfortable to support this. And I think the first part to get the report doesn't put too much pressure on staff because it's a big job, but by end of financial year, I think is a good way to go, and I support the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Thurley. I have a speaker for, but I have one question from Councillor Van der Ven.
Yes, thank you. Councillor Thurley's previous comment about an item, the Sustainability Committee, haven't we just lost our Energy and Sustainability Officer?
No.
No.
It's a different position.
Okay.
Different position.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cameron, speaking for.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to congratulate Eli for speaking tonight. It's very succinct and to the point and accurate. It behooves us to do more, particularly the outpouring of concern in our community and a community across Australia, a broader community. Makes it very clear what people's expectations are and ought to be. So let's have a closer look at this and improve. Thank you.
Thank you. Question, Councillor Gluckin.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to, through you to the most relevant member of staff, I'd like to confirm that when the staff prepare this report, they will ensure that our footprint from a number of years ago, before all of these initiatives have come forward, like the halve waste, before the solar panels, before the initiatives to put in special equipment that monitored the pumps, the sewer pumps, etc., so that all of that work that has already been done is noted as achieved, So therefore, we're not trying to compete with local councils that have recently set targets of 80% reduction of their footprint, because we are not in that space. So I'd like that to be confirmed, if I could, please.
Ms Squire.
Through you, Mr Mayor. Thanks, Councillor Glack, and yes, we're happy to make sure that's reflected in the report.
Thank you. There appears to be no further question or debate. The only thing I'd like to raise, probably with Councillor Vander, I think you raised at the last meeting, and it was towards the end of the evening, about reinvesting in energy renewables. Is that right? Yeah. Which would be also a further step in this right direction, would it not?
Yeah, that's right, Mr Mayor, and I think the items were going to be addressed in the September review from the answer that we got on that night. Yeah, so I was happy with that because it gives them a bit of time to sort out that low-hanging fruit that we could use, because it's a real opportunity for us, seeing we're getting a reducing return on our cash investments with financial institutions. We may as well try and generate that return on our funds internally by cost savings or power savings, etc.
Which is also ambitious and achievable.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Councillor Con, do you wish to close debate?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll be brief. Our community has told us loud and clear that they want greater action on climate change. I thank my fellow councillors who've spoken in support. Albury City's led and innovated before. Our halfway program's been accoladed. The Southern Lights project is innovative and ambitious and achievable. Let's lead and innovate again and give the community what they're asking us for.
Thank you, Councillor Con. Happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. 13.2, our media policy. Councillor Glacken.
Thank you. I'd like to move that the recommendation as a motion, Mr Mayor, that Council adopt the Albury City media policy.
Thank you. Councillor Doxey.
Happy to second, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Glack, do you wish to open debate on that?
Yes, very briefly. Mr Mayor, the changes proposed or the minor changes proposed within the media policy are sensible, logical, and actually part of the Act, and we should have been behaving in accordance with them all the while we have all been on council. So it's logical to ensure that for anyone who may think otherwise, that we need to have that in there, and that we as councillors know exactly what we are not able to say in the media. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Glacken. Speaker against, Councillor Cameron.
I have some concerns with point 12 of the policy. I don't accept that the draft policy, I don't accept that point 12, that we're compelled to do that and to not comment on such matters that are development matters. And I don't accept that we're compelled to do that by the Act. It's not my reading of the Act. I think that councillors are elected by the community, and one of the roles of a councillor is articulated in the Act, that is certainly articulated in the Act, is that councillors are responsible, specifically individually responsible to their community for decisions that they make. And to suggest that councillors should be subject to a code of silence on development matters before those matters are voted on, I don't think is fair. I think councillors should make known their position if they're asked, and they should inform that position through consultation with their community. I know I certainly do. And we should never be afraid to say why we support or why we oppose certain things, and demonstrate to those who elect us and to those that we are statutorily responsible to why we have formed those views.
Thank you. I have a question from Councillor Glacken before another speaker against. Councillor Glacken.
Thank you. Through you to the most relevant member of staff, my understanding of the Act is that councillors will not indicate how they will vote or how they intend to vote prior to a council meeting, and my understanding is that this also carries across to planning matters. Could the most relevant member of staff please confirm whether I am correct or not as with regards to the Act?
Mr Zachnich.
Thank you, through you, Mr Mayor. Thanks for the question. So the provisions have been included in the protocols of the media policy, really to support councillors' awareness of commentary, in particular around development applications, in particular around ensuring they have an informed view with all the information prior to indicating how they might vote on a particular issue. The Act certainly talks about indicating beforehand around voting. This is more a protocol than supporting councillors in that endeavour. So if they are to make public comment, it is obviously a personal comment. It's not a comment on behalf of the council, which is what the Code of Conduct talks about. So hopefully that's provided some clarification. In terms of dealing with any concerns that the council might have in respect to that clause, the opportunity is there to remove the clause, but bearing in mind that the Code of Conduct still applies at all time.
Thank you. Councillor Gluggin is comfortable with that response? Another question from Councillor Cameron.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Through you to the General Manager. I'm sorry, the CEO. CEO? In answering Councillor Gluckin's question just then, you referred to, you made a statement in words similar to, or exactly, that the Act talks about indicating a vote beforehand. Were you referencing the provisions of the Act which deal with caucusing, or are there other provisions of the Act that you were referring to?
Mr Zachnich.
It specifically relates to the caucusing provisions.
Isn't it the fact that caucusing in the Act refers to a binding agreement which has consequences? And and of course, elections of mayors are exempt from this process, and deputy mayors. Isn't that the case through you, Mr Mayor?
Mr Zachnich.
Yes, that's the case, Councillor Cameron.
So, in response to Councillor Gluckin's question, so that I'm clear in my understanding, apart from the references to caucusing in the Act, and bearing in mind the definition of caucusing is that where there are consequences to be carried out or sanctions for not abiding to a binding decision, there is no statutory requirement for us to have Section 12 in this policy, is there?
Mr Zachnich.
As I said from the outset, it's a protocol guiding councillors. The full component of the clause offers assistance from council's media officer if councillors are to make comment, how that comment might be made in order to provide support and assistance to councillors around commenting on those issues. If it's a simple matter of deleting this provision in the protocol, that's no issue. Bearing in mind again that the provisions around caucusing, as they're detailed in the Code of Conduct, will apply.
I don't want to labour the point, but I shall, with your permission, Mr Mayor, because I wouldn't want to be confused. My understanding is that caucusing is defined as an agreement to vote a certain way, which carries with it sanctions if the person or group of people don't follow that agreed position. Is that correct?
Mr Zachnich.
Yes, as I've indicated, that's correct.
It would not apply to 2 councillors, for example, or 3 councillors or 9 councillors having a discussion about their respective positions and their respective views on the merits of a proposal before council or to come before council, if there were no sanctions or agreement to vote a certain way. Or indeed, if there was an agreement to vote a certain way, but there was no agreed sanctions or possibility of sanctions for not following through with that agreement.
Mr Zachnich.
It's certainly Councillor Cameron, but that's not what this clause is talking about.
So the second part of my clarification for my own elucidation then is that it is the case, isn't it, that there is absolutely no statutorial requirement for us to have to adopt the policy, including clause 12, as it's currently proposed.
Mr Zachnich.
No statutory requirement, as I mentioned, it's a protocol.
Question, Councillor Vandervan. 2 speakers against.
Yeah, look, just following on from the discussion that's just been had with Councillor Cameron and the CEO, can I clarify the position that notwithstanding the item 12, that if a councillor makes it quite clear in any comment to the media that he is speaking from his own personal experience or his own personal thoughts, surely he's entitled to make some comment about parts of a development application that he might not agree with. For argument's sake, let's take, for example, as a development application that, says that there's got to be a 2.4 metre high fence somewhere, and you don't like 2.4 metre high fences. So surely I could say in that particular instance, it's my opinion that I don't like 2.4 metre fences. That doesn't mean I'm going to vote for or against a particular development application. Surely this media policy, the overriding is you can comment as long as you make it clear that you're commenting as yourself, not as the corporate council.
Mr Sacknage.
That's correct, Councillor Vanderven, as I've indicated. Yep.
Speaker against, Councillor Con.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I might save us all time and energy by proposing to Councillor Glacken that she might amend her motion to exclude Protocol 12.
Councillor Glacken.
Yes, can I just read it again to make sure we can't reword it accordingly?
I can read it out to you.
It's just in front of me here. Thank you. My issue is that it would also then take out councillors and council employees must not. So can I request that we defer this and enable the staff to look at the opportunity to be able to have it around council employees only?
So you propose...
The clause 12 is about council. Councillors and council employees must not comment. So if the intention is to allow councillors, then that's one thing, but we need to be mindful that there are two sets of people within this clause. So we would need to check with the the CEO, whether or not there is another clause that means that council employees would not be able to.
Mr Sacknage.
As I mentioned previously, no issue with removing the clause in its entirety. We can deal with those issues you mentioned in an alternative fashion.
That's fine. Happy with that.
So are you happy to amend the motion, or are you happy for...
With the exclusion of line 12.
Okay.
Yeah.
Councillor Doxey, you comfortable with that?
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I think we probably all need a little bit more time to think about this one. We could probably defer it. Is there a time frame to this?
No. No, not at this point. But at the moment, the motion before us that Council adopt the Albury City media policy with removal or exception of Protocol 12. Is it your view that you don't wish to do that?
No, I'm happy to continue to second if that's the judgment of my peers. But it's one of those policies that I think all 8 present tonight should all support, one way or the other.
So, Councillor Con, did you have anything further you wish to add to that?
I was going to speak, but I don't know whether I'm for or against because I've lost track of which version of this motion we're debating.
At the moment, we've reverted to the original motion because Councillor Doxey doesn't wish to support the amendment or the suggested amendment. Did you wish
then
to
I will speak against it, please.
Speak against it, and away you go.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I'm obviously speaking against Protocol 12 and I'd be happy to support the rest of the media policy without it. Look, in my opinion, Protocol 12 is just a gag on debate. It says that councillors and council employees must not comment to the media on DAs that are yet to be considered by the council. There's already a number of aspects of the Code of Conduct that govern the way that councillors and council staff can speak to the media. Things like preempting a decision of the council, using language that's derogatory or defamatory is already prohibited. noted. And my understanding is that the policy before us also prevents council employees from speaking on items that are considered political or contentious, which I think any DA that's coming to council would be considered political or contentious. A clause that prevents councillors from speaking to the media entirely on a whole class of decisions is unnecessarily restrictive. It will prohibit debate, and I also echo Councillor Cameron's comments that it limits us from actually doing our job and engaging with the community fully. I think the Code of Conduct already governs the way that we do that sufficiently. Clause 12 is unnecessary, and I also believe that it's unenforceable, given that it goes above and beyond the Code of Conduct and the Act.
Thank you. Councillor Vanderman, question.
I withdraw my intended question, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley, no speakers for you or a speaker against?
I am, and I flagged that if this motion fails, I'll move the original motion with the added words that Protocol 12 be removed. As a councillor, you're required, as Councillor Cameron has said, you're there to represent the community, you're there to put a view. I appreciate that sometimes you need to say this is just my personal point of view, and I have frequently had to say that on a number of occasions about the Murray-Darling Association and other matters. There's absolutely no doubt in my mind that when it comes to development applications, one needs to be very, very careful, because you could end up in the Land and Environment Court. So, but I don't think this warrants a ban on a councillor speaking. So if this motion fails, I'll move the original motion with the added words. I'll move that motion without Protocol 12.
Thank you. Question, Councillor Vanderman?
Thanks, Mr Mayor. How did item 12 get into the media policy?
Ms Squire?
Through you, Mr Mayor, as touched on by the CEO, it was really designed not to seek to curb discussion of councillors, but provide some guidance around some of the challenges associated with commenting on development applications, particularly where councillors haven't yet had the opportunity to receive that information.
Okay. Okay, we've heard all the debate. Councillor Glacken, do you wish to close debate?
I will, rather than close debate, I will withdraw my motion and open the opportunity for another councillor to move their said motion. Thank you.
At this point, I'm happy to put the motion and observe the position of the...
I wish not to close debate, but to withdraw. You have not yet said that you were going to, prior to my saying that you had not yet said you were going to
Okay,
put the motion.
so we'll withdraw this motion.
Thank you.
Councillor...
Seconded the withdrawal as well, Mr Mayor?
No, apparently not. So the motion is withdrawn. Councillor Thurley, did you wish to propose an alternate motion?
Yes, Mr Mayor, I move that Council adopt the AlburyCity media policy except for Protocol 12.
Thank you. Councillor Con?
Thank you. I'd like to second that.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley, you wish to open debate on that one?
I don't think anything more needs to be said, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Cameron, your light's pressed. Did you wish to speak?
No, I'm going to vote for this, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried that Council adopt the AlburyCity media policy with exception of Protocol 12. It sounds like a new drug on the... Motion is carried. Thank you. Okay. Councillor Vanderman.
I need to advise on late consideration that I need to lodge a conflict of interest for the next item.
Okay.
So I will fill in the requisite forms at some stage, but I will declare a conflict.
And your action?
Leave the chamber as one of the nominated community representatives.
Okay.
Is a person that I have close business dealings with.
Okay, no worries. All right. Let the record reflect that Councillor Vanderman has indicated a late conflict and will be leaving the chamber. Okay, thank you, Mr Christie. Councillor Glacken.
Thank you. Through you, Mr Mayor, to move the recommendation as a motion that Council A, endorse the terms of reference for the Albury Aquatics Facility Advisory Committee, B, nominate a councillor to represent council and act as chairperson, and C, endorse the nominations of Peter Slattery and Stephen Mamuni as community representatives, and confirm that it's my intention that we agree to this first and then call for nominations if we could.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley.
I'll second the motion, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Glacken, did you wish to open debate on this?
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. This committee is not new. It's a revised and remodelled committee with a view to taking the existing pools, the infrastructure, aquatic infrastructure in Albury. Regretfully, the Wodonga City Council didn't want to participate with this committee, but it's an opportunity for us to continue to work with the community groups who utilise those facilities, but also with a view to being able to lead those aquatic facilities or aquatic facilities in general and holistically into the future. So I think it's a good process has been undertaken to endorse these two nominations, and we need to ensure that we can enact this committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cameron, you wish to speak for?
Has this been seconded? It has.
Yes, it has.
Thank you. I'd speak in support. It's been a less than pleasing saga, the saga of the new aquatics contract. It is good, I suppose, that we have been able to achieve what we've achieved. I'm pleased that to come to this point where we have a new committee, but I'm bitterly disappointed in the stubborn and dogged refusal of Wodonga to participate. In my view, it calls into question their commitment to our overwhelming, what should be our overwhelming goal of 2 cities, 1 community, and they need to have a bloody good hard look at themselves. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cameron. Councillor Kine, you wish to speak for the motion?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yes, I support the motion. I'm glad that this committee is finally going to take shape. We've had some challenges with aquatics facilities in this term of council, I think is putting it lightly, and earlier and more comprehensive consultation with our community could have prevented some of those issues. So looking forward to it moving forward, and also hope that at some stage Wodonga will join us.
Thank you, Councillor Kine. Councillor Glacken, do you wish to close debate on this motion?
Thank you. And just to confirm, there have been previous aquatics committees for a number of years. In fact, I think we're well over 1 decade, if not longer. And this would be the third, from my memory, it's the third such aquatics committee that is being put together. And it is the third such committee that has been discussing the future of aquatics facilities, as in another aquatics facility within our community. Just to confirm, considerable consultation has already taken place over a number of years, if not probably almost decades, plural. And this committee will then enable us to continue that good work of the consultation with the user groups, but also the community. Thank you.
Thank you. On that note, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? Motion is carried. I'll take nominations now for this committee. Okay, yeah, bring him back in. Let the record reflect that Councillor Vanderman has returned to the chamber for the nomination of the council committee member. So I'm happy to take a nomination as a motion. Councillors, Councillor Doxey.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I nominate Councillor Glacken.
Yep. Councillor Glacken, do you accept that nomination?
Yes, thank you. I was ready to nominate. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Vanderman,
I'd like to nominate myself.
you want to nominate yourself?
Yeah.
Okay, no worries. Yep. Councillor Stutchbury? No, you've given up. So it would appear we have two nominations for the role, and as is the process, we will have a show of hands. Yes?
Nomination as an alternate delegate.
Okay.
If that's going to resolve that issue.
All right, a
delegate,
substitute
sorry.
delegate. Yep, no problem at all. That does. So I need a mover and seconder that Councillor Glacken be nominated as the member of this committee. Councillor Thurley.
I so move, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. And a seconder is Councillor Stutchbury.
I second that, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. So the mover and seconder, are you happy to include that Councillor Vanderven be the alternate delegate or the substitute delegate? Thank you. So that's a motion that Councillor Glacken is the delegate for the Aquatics Facility Advisory Committee and the substitute delegate is Councillor Vanderven. Okay, I'll put that motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. That's the next report, actually, up there. Okay. Well, my motion is carried. Now we're on to the 13.4, which is the committees and working parties register update. Councillors? Item 1 has been dealt with, that's what I mean. So we can remove item 1 from there.
Yep, can do, which we'll do directly.
Thank you. Okay, so thank you, councillors. Councillor Thurley.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I move that Council A elect and or confirm its representatives for the following committees and working parties. 1, one substitute delegate to the Companion Animals Advisory Panel, and 2, other relevant committee working party following advice at the meeting, and B, adopt the revised 2019-2020 Albury City Committees and Working Parties Register.
Thank you. Seconder, thanks. Councillor Stutchbury.
Second that, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley, do you respect that at all?
No, Mr Mayor, just to indicate that I will, I'm prepared to remain on all the committees that I'm on at the moment.
Yep. Thank you. Councillor Stutchbury.
Anyone interested in the UMCT?
Kill me with the silence. At this point, we're after a substitute delegate and for the Companion Animals Advisory Committee. Is there anyone interested in being the substitute? I'm the actual delegate. I actually inherited it from you, Councillor Cameron. Yep.
I'd like to make the offer of making my extensive expertise in small animal management available. Again, Mr Mayor.
No one's interested.
Particularly the breeding of ferrets.
Thank you, the ferrets. I knew that was coming up. Okay, so we can amend the motion to include the substitute delegate to be Councillor Cameron, and we can then move that motion. I think by exception, the other areas are all been considered by councils and councillors and will remain the same. So, councillors, that's what we're considering very shortly. Yes, Councillor Cameron? Okay. So, on that note, Councillor Thurley, do you wish to close debate?
No, thank you, Mr Mayor.
I'm happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. 13.5, the local area traffic management, Tembrink Street and Ryan Road. Councillor Glacken.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Through you, to move the recommendation as a motion, and I'll take the recommendation on the board to be the same as in the folder, that council endorse the preferred treatment, specifically A, installation of stop signs at Wilkinson Street, Tenbrick Street and Hodge Street, Tenbrick Street intersections. B, implement channellised turn lanes at the Hodge Street, Tenbrick Street intersection. C, implement a surface treatment on Tenbrick Street between Ryan Road and Hodge Street. D, implement a speed zone reduction from 60 kilometres to 50 kilometres per hour on Ryan Road and Tenbrick Street. E, installation of barrier railing at the intersection of Tenbrick and Wilkinson Streets. And F, close the southbound access to Watson Street on the Chenery Burrows Ryan roundabout for a trial period of 3 months. And G, continue to monitor the Tenbrick Street Ryan Road intersections with consideration for possible improvement in the future.
Thank you. Seconder, Councillor Con.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Happy to second that.
Thank you. Question, Councillor Glegg, you happy for me to take the question?
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cameron.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Did you have a question?
Yes, I do. Through you to the most appropriate member of staff. I'd like to I'd just like to ask a brief question about the status of community consultation. I colloquially have been told, and I understand, that it's been quite positive. Can the staff please confirm for us that these proposed treatments are well received by those who have been consulted with in the local community in the vicinity of Ryan Road and Tenbrick Street and Hodge Street? And as far as people can be content in this sort of situation, is there generally positive reception of these proposed treatments?
Mr Lawson.
Yes, through you, Mr Mayor. Thanks for the question. Yes, as detailed in the report, there wasn't significant feedback received, but in general, there was a positive feedback around some of those treatments, and all those treatments, as the councillors received in their letter, were detailed within that letter. But generally, there was positive feedback around trying to improve the traffic movement through that area.
Through you, Mr Mayor, were there any specific objections to the proposed treatments?
Through you, Mr Mayor, with regard to the closure of southbound entrance into Watson Street, there was a couple of objections, and they were mainly from residents up in the Golf Links area, and that was due to access issues. As detailed in the report, we calculated that the adverse effect of that would be somewhere in the vicinity of 40 seconds extra travel time.
Thank you. Councillor Vanham, you have a question also?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. There are in the report a mention of having a look at the treatments to make sure how effective they are, but there's no time limit for that review. Is it possible to have a time limit to see how effective some of the ones that have that review clause on it? Can we put a time limit for that review to occur, please?
Mr Lawson?
Yes, through you, Mr Mayor. Thanks for the question again. Yeah, we can just include the rest of those elements in the 3-month timeframe as per the road closure, if you like.
Okay, Councillor Glegg, can you just speak to that?
Yes, thank you. And if Councillor Con is happy, I'll modify that motion slightly. So to retain close the southbound access to Watson Street and Chenery Burrows Ryan roundabout for the period of 3 months, for a trial period of 3 months, and add an H, which would be to report back to council on all the treatments, or the success or otherwise of all the other treatments at the 3-month period.
Councillor Con, you comfortable with that?
Yep.
Yep.
If staff can indicate that 3 months is a reasonable period by which they are happy to report back on all of those, or would they like 6 months for everything?
Thank you. Mr Lawson?
Other than the F.
Through you, Mr Mayor, we're comfortable with the 3-month timeframe. We just need some time to analyse that data following that, and then we can follow that up with a report to council.
Okay. Councillor Glegg, just open debate.
Yes, thank you very much. The report indicated, and I know there's been a lot of communication between councillors and staff over a period of weeks now. The report indicated significant community consultation. It also highlighted the fact that not everyone is happy with the suggested outcomes, which is why staff have fashioned the recommendation so that F, the southbound access to Watson Street closure, would be for a trial period of 3 months. And I think that's a really positive opportunity or a positive outcome to this, because we can trial it, review it, and if it's not working, then it can be reconsidered and perhaps taken out. But it offers a number of other measures, so not just one measure, but a number of measures combined that should make a significant change and have a significant positive safety and community effect in the affected areas. It's important that a number of other opportunities or a number of other treatments were actually looked at, investigated and reviewed and raised as part of the consultation. And a number of those measures, or the measures that aren't being included, were either cost prohibitive or they are expensive, but also had negative side effects as well. So it'll be interesting to see whether or not this suite of treatments and work can actually have the desired positive effect we're looking for. And if not, there are other aspects that could also be reviewed to, again, try and work with the community and the people in that area to ensure that they have a safe but still accessible location. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Doxey, you wish to speak for?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I will be supporting this motion. But first I want to thank staff for how quick they were in responding to the needs of the community. And I think this is a good opportunity to go ahead with this. And I'm happy to see that we've now moving to a 3-month review. I think that's important. But having been the person that stood out there on the corner on a couple of occasions and visited people out there in Timbrink Street, that is very, very vital, because the speed over that hill at 60 certainly had to be reduced at some stage. So I strongly recommend this to my fellow councillors.
Thank you. There being no further question or debate, Councillor Glycan, do you wish to close debate?
Yes, I would simply like to add in closing that the communication with our community was so good that a community member suggested the installation of barrier railing, and that was taken on by our staff. So that highlights the positive opportunity that that community in that particular area have had, the input they've made, and the fact that our staff have been able to bring that to part of this recommendation here tonight and part of that treatment, which is really positive. Thank you.
Thank you. Happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against the motion is carried. 13.6, the draft Bunton Park Master Plan. Thank you, councillors. Councillor Vanderman.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Happy to move the recommendation as a motion that Council A receive and endorse the draft Bunton Park Master Plan. B, place the draft Bunton Park Master Plan on public exhibition for a minimum of 28 days. And C, if no submissions are received, that the draft Bunton Park Master Plan be adopted.
Thank you, Councillor Glycan. Councillor Vanderman. Councillor Glycan.
Thank you. Happy to second that, and then I'll have a couple of questions, if I may.
Yes, you happy for me to take those questions, Councillor Vanderman? Councillor Glycan.
Thank you. The master planning is an opportunity to look at the entire park and look at a number of aspects. It can't, or it's, my understanding, it's not envisaged that that master plan would be undertaken in one go. Can I ask to the most relevant member of staff, what sort of timeframe would we be looking at, likely looking at, noting that it still has to be master planned? And also, what sort of ballpark costs would we be looking at? Again, it's still got to be master planned. The final planning has to be done, and this is going out to consultation, but an idea of the cost and the time frame. Thank you.
Mr Armstrong.
Through you, Mr Mayor, and thanks for the question. As outlined in the report, it's a 20-year plan, so it's a long-term plan for the master plan. We haven't got full costings for all the works at this stage, but that will be provided into an additional report coming back to council with the comments that were received. At the moment, there's funding in the budget to do lighting and some designs and some building. That's in the 4-year delivery program. Once plan is actually endorsed, we'll have some more conversations with the sports club and the user groups around their priority projects, and then looking at funding strategies around that.
Okay. Comfortable with that?
I really was hoping to get a bit more than it's going to be 20 years. There must be some sort of phasing that's anticipated. Again, it's not finalised, but I would hate to think that it's going to be 20 years until we get 95% of it achieved, is what I'm really getting at. I get that it's 20 years, it's a master plan for 20 years, but yeah.
Mr Armstrong.
Yeah, look, a lot of it's around funding and availability of funding to for the works to occur. Like in a number of projects, we've been lucky with grant funding. Having a master plan at the back of that helps us with grant opportunities. So to give you a more finite time frame is going to be depending on the appetite for council to contribute to the funding, as well as other grant funding that we may be able to get through other avenues.
Councillor Clacken.
And would that also include contributions? For example, JC Park, the users contributed significantly to that.
Yeah, through you, Mr Mayor, that would be certainly a discussion we have with the user groups about co-contributions, and we've seen the benefit of that through JC King Park, Urena Road Oval, and even a number of projects we're working on at the moment about improving council infrastructure with co-contributions and grant funding.
Thank you. Councillor Vandervan, do you wish to open debate?
Yes, briefly, Mr Mayor, obviously they are some of the interesting outcomes after a public exhibition process, and maybe any changes or not that might arise from that public exhibition process. But yeah, the next steps are obviously prioritising the projects in that master plan, the things that needed to be done, and then obviously the funding for it. So that was something that I was going to be asking for. So thank you, Councillor Glacken. But this process, or the master plan for this precinct, has been in genesis for at least 2.5 years, and I note that the sporting groups have been heavily engaged in that whole process. So I congratulate the staff and the sporting groups for the massive contribution they've made to get this to the stage where it's at. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Vandervan. There appears to be no further questions or debate. Just a question to Mr Armstrong from myself. In relation to this particular master plan, like we have an abundance of master plans, and following on from Councillor Glacken's question, and the theme of the evening seems to be ambitious and achievable, do you believe that it is this particular... I like the master plan. I think it is really paying homage to the opportunity there. But right now, I, like Councillor Glacken, wouldn't like to see that this club is not treated as equally as we treat other clubs, whether they find the funds or not. But how is this achievable? Is this master plan achievable? And if so, what do we need to do to make it happen?
Yeah, through you, Mr Mayor, and thanks for the question again. Yeah, look, I believe it's achievable. If I have a look at a lot of the master plans we've done through Thiguna Oval, Urena Road Oval, through the times we've actually achieved a lot out of those, and it gives user groups direction on their facilities, but also helps them prioritise works, so we can have a joint approach to getting funding for any of these projects. So yes, I think it's achievable, and we'll continue to work with the user groups and making those elements achievable.
So, am I to believe the local and often maligned Border Mail, and understand that the Bunton Park or the North Albury Sports Club are looking for potential partners in the future?
That's from a club perspective. Yeah, we haven't dealt with the club side of it in this master plan. It's just around the community facilities and the sports ground and from a sporting perspective.
So they're not looking at sharing any other facilities than just the club?
Sorry,
Are they looking at sharing the ground or as a caretaker club, or are they looking at sharing with another football club, or?
Not at this stage, no, not as part of the conversations I've had with them, yeah.
Okay, thank you. All right, Councillor Vanderven, did you wish to close debate?
Just briefly, just to follow up on some of the questions you've raised and Councillor Gracken raised as well. I think it really depends on the appetite of council to, provide funding to enable a lot of this to happen. It depends on priorities. We've in the past had master plans for the Thaguna Oval, for Lamington Sports Ground, for the Arana Road Oval, and when things have come up that have provided opportunities for grant funding, we've taken them, contributed to them, because the direction or the plans are in place with the master plan. And I think, as Mr Armstrong said, having the master plan enables us to, to have, if you like, nearly shovel-ready projects should grant opportunities arise. And I think that then comes back on councillors to have that appetite for, providing the funding to match any grant funding, the opportunities that might arrive. So I think this is absolutely the start of the process, and we await with eagerness the follow-up prioritisation and opportunities that might arise out of that.
Thank you. Happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. 13.7, the Mungabarina Aboriginal Place Management Plan. Councillor Conn.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I move that Council A receive and note the 8 submissions received in response to the public exhibition of the draft Mungabarina Aboriginal Place Management Plan, and B, adopt the revised Mungabarina Aboriginal Place Management Plan as attached to the report.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley.
I'll second the motion, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Conn, do you wish to speak to that?
Only briefly, Mr Mayor. In response to the submissions, I think we've made some small but meaningful changes to the management plan. This is the end of a really long process with detailed consultation. I'm really excited to see what the new management committee will do with the space.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley, you wish to speak for?
I just wanted to add to that, for too long this place has been a mess and poorly treated by our community, and it's great to see what we've got in front of us now.
Thank you. There are no other speakers for or against, but I'm happy to reiterate your point there, Councillor Thurley. I think, again, I hope this is a great opportunity for us to actually realise this is as a sacred place for Indigenous culture, but also for us with our Wigira Trail and other elements to champion as a place where people don't trash, because it is, at the moment, a sight for sore eyes. Councillor Vanderman, question.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I note with some interest that some of the submissions made included reference to individuals. And do we need to revisit this plan every time that individual changes, or do we put in there a generic position name and it doesn't really matter then who fills that position within the group? Because there were specific names mentioned. Now, that person might get a promotion or whatever, so is there an opportunity to not only put the person's current name but their position title, so that the people on that management board, if you like, are not, it's not person dependent but
Succession
position dependent.
yeah.
That there is some succession.
Ms Donnelly.
Through you, Mr Mayor, thanks for the question. We have 5 agencies involved in the management plan, so it would make sense just to have the 5 agency representatives not mentioned, but just have the organisation. So Crown Land, AlburyCity, the Albury District Aboriginal Land Council, and the Office of Environment and Heritage, which is now DPC, I think.
They changed their names.
They did, yeah. So it would make sense, rather than have individuals' names for those 5 agencies, have them just listed, and perhaps 6 Aboriginal community members just listed as 3 male and 3 female, in line with the management plan.
Yep. You comfortable with that, Councillor Vanderman?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep. Speaker 4, Councillor Cameron.
I'd like to echo the statements, the positive statements that have been made today. But I don't want to prolong the process, and if Councillor Vandervan is happy with where we're at, so be it, I'll support it. But, you know, maybe we should look at just having a generic statement about stakeholders too. Be another way to approach it. But if you're happy with the motion, I'm happy to support it.
Thank you. Just a question for Mr. Donnelly from myself. In relation to the general consensus on this project and the way forward, what's your view on the potential outcomes and how the Indigenous community are embracing this particular project?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I'm really excited by the opportunities and the fact that we've spent 3 years doing a huge amount of consultation, and we've got 6 elders that have nominated 3 men and 3 women who are well respected in the community, but all have strong views and will actually provide really positive input and conversation about the cultural values. So they're not yes people, they're actually willing to step up and step out and have a say. In saying that, I think that we need to probably manage those personalities quite differently and approach them and have a lot of face-to-face dialogue and meeting on site individually. That's a more culturally appropriate way to get decent responses from them.
So funding for any works proposed at this site, where does
So-
that come from?
We've actually currently got $70,000 from Heritage New South Wales to undertake a partnership with the Albury District Aboriginal Land Council. That funding is obviously subject to endorsement of this management plan and is ready to roll pretty much straight away. There's also special variation of rates funding, so it's about $150,000 with that to undertake vegetation management and improvements at Mungab. So all up, there's a reasonable amount of funding to get started on the project.
So how do we stop the four-wheel drives, mate?
Lots of rocks for now, and then we work with the community group to actually define the issue with Mungab now is that as a gazetted Aboriginal place, if we do any ground disturbance, we've got to apply for an AHIP, an Aboriginal Heritage Impact Permit. So I think to get runs on the board quickly, we could actually continue just putting some rocks in those trails and work with the management group on a more permanent solution.
Excellent. Okay. Councillor Conn, do you wish to close debate?
No thanks, Mr Mayor.
Happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. Thank you, Mr Donnelly. 13.8, the Albury Riverside Precinct Updated Concept Designs. Councillor Conn.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I move that Council A endorse the refined Riverside Precinct Concept Plan, B place the refined Riverside Precinct Concept Plan on public exhibition for a minimum of 28 days, and C consider any feedback received during this consultation while finalising the detailed design phase of the project.
Thank you. Councillor Doxey.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Very happy to second this motion.
Councillor Conn, did you wish to open debate?
Thanks, Mr Mayor. This project has had the most community interest of any other project we've undertaken in this term of council. We've had a huge amount of input from the community. I'm very proud and pleased to see that the revised concept plan has taken a lot of that feedback on board, so that feedback we got from the community is really valued. I think that the revised concept really enhances the space in a way that keeps it public open space for the community to enjoy. It makes the riverfront more accessible, and it's something that I hope visitors will enjoy as well. So I'm looking forward to hearing from our community again what they think of the update.
Thank you. There are no further speakers for or against. I'm happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. 13.9, the gift that keeps giving, the Monument Hill redevelopment contract. Councillor Glacken.
Thank you. Through you to move the recommendation as Mr Mayor, recommendation as a motion that Council accepts the tender from AP Delaney and Co Proprietary Limited for contract number 1903797, Monument Hill redevelopment for the lump sum amount of $1,345,650, including GST. And I have a question.
Thank you. Councillor Vandervan, you wish to second?
Happy to second, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Glycan, you wish to have a question before you open debate?
Yes, before I open debate, if I could, to the most relevant member of staff, is there a water fountain up in the vicinity of the top of Monument Hill? Because if there is, I haven't yet found it. And if there is not, is it possible to add that to the list, the wish list, please?
Mr Armstrong, do you know where this water fountain is?
Through you, Mr Mayor, and thanks for the question. The answer to your question is no, there's not a water drinking fountain up at Monument Hill, but certainly one can be put up there. We are putting a lot around the city now, especially in the last probably 12 months with all the fitness stations. So it's certainly a spot where we need one, so it can be included in the plans.
And do you wish to open
Thank
debate?
you very much. Yes, I'd love to open debate. The monument is one of those spaces, as is articulated in the report. It's one of those spaces within our community that is very popular. Lots of people go there. Without revealing too much, he's talking, so that's great. On our wedding night, we drove up to the top of the monument and looked out at the city because we wanted to remember that we had been married here in this city. It's one of those places where you see lots of people walking up and down. It is the place where you take lots of visitors and you can see both cities from the monument. The view down Dean Street is amazing, and you see lots of buildings that are from a different perspective, a different angle, but you get a pride in your community. And that's just looking out before we even look at what the monument is. So the monument is located on a significant part of our community, and it's significant to many people. The monument represents a memorial, or is a memorial to those who have not just fought, but for many who died in battle, originally from one of the great wars. However, more latterly, it's been a place where we are able to recognise the service of many of our service personnel over many conflicts and many deployments over almost, in fact, over a century now. The memorial is a significant and iconic piece of architecture. The opportunity that we have now, if we accept the tender and offer a tender, the opportunity that we have now is to enhance both the location, which is significant for us as a community, but also to pay further respect and further, dare I say, homage to the monument that is such a significant part of our lives as a community and has been for generations. I encourage councillors to accept this tender and note the significance of this location as a location, as a site, but also the monument and all that it reflects. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Glycan. Speaker 4, Councillor Doxey.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. First, I'd like to thank Mr Armstrong and his team, particularly Mr Armstrong himself, because I know he has a strong interest in these sort of things. He whizzes around the weekends looking at every opportunity to enhance our city, and I thank him for that. I was up there last Wednesday evening with a media team from Sydney. They were doing a segment, and whilst I was up there, there was a coach load of visitors to our city, and they were amazed at the views they could see as the sun was setting and the lights were coming on along down Dean Street. But not only the coach load, there was at least 8 cars with other people as I was there for some 2 hours with this particular group. This is a significant upgrade of the Albury War Memorial, and we are hoping that is all the veterans of the area that attend on both the services and all the community that we'll have it completed by Anzac Day 2020. I'm looking across at you, Mr Armstrong. And we can reconsecrate the memorial on that day, because it was on Anzac Day in 1926 that it was consecrated originally, and the funding from the community built that war memorial. It is significant, and I've had discussions with Indigenous community in relation to a plaque, that they haven't got a plaque up there at this stage. We're working towards that, and that'll virtually close the loop on what that area up there needs. So I strongly, again, recommend this to my fellow councillors. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Doxey. There are no further speakers for or against. Councillor Glacken, do you wish to close the debate?
No, thank you, Mr Mayor.
Happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. 13.10, the Albury Waste Management Centre Education Centre. Councillor Vandervan.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll move that motion that Council A accepts the tender from Connolly Construction Services for contract number 19/03944, Albury Waste Management Centre Education Centre, for the lump sum amount of $626,769, including GST, and B, reallocate additional funds from the Albury Waste Management Centre Detention Basin Project as part of the quarterly review process.
Thank you. Councillor Doxey.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. What a great idea. Happy to second. Thank you.
Councillor Vandervan, you wish to speak to it?
Briefly, Mr Mayor, I think this, again, this education centre has been on the drawing boards for some time. It provides us with an opportunity to showcase our work at the Waste Management Centre from the point of view of not only the energy generation, but also the way that we deal with our waste, and are improving the way that we deal with our waste over a long period of time. We can show that to the likes of the gentleman here tonight, Eli, and his cohort, and other children. It was great when I had the pleasure of opening the solar farm, to see the kids there from the school representing the future generations and what we can do for them. And this is a great way of having a formal area where we can show them the benefits of what we're doing out there. Thanks, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Glacken, you wish to speak for?
Yes, really to highlight a couple of aspects that Councillor Vandervan has already spoken about, and to really emphasise the success that we have had as a community with, for example, the Halve Waste Program, HALVE. The Halve Waste Program has been extremely successful because it has been accepted by the community, and part of that acceptance, a lot of that acceptance, was because of our children within that community took this up and became excited about it. And that has been fantastic, because we are well towards meeting our targets. In fact, in some areas, we've actually overshot our targets already. So I agree with Councillor Vandervan, to be able to have an education facility to continue that and to make, again, greater opportunities for our community is fantastic.
Thank you, Councillor Glacken. Councillor Vandervan, no speakers for or against. Did you wish to close debate?
No, thank you, Mr Mayor.
Happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. 13.11, the air conditioning services, various council buildings. Thank you, councillors. Councillor Vandervan.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I move the council accepts the tenders panel contract from Max Air Conditioning Proprietary Limited, O'Connell's Refrigeration and Air Conditioning Proprietary Limited, BSA Limited, and Plazair HVAC-R for the provision of air conditioning services, various council buildings. Schedule of rates contract number 18/02276 for a 3-year period at an estimated contract value of $725,000, including GST. And I do have a question.
Thank you. Councillor Glacken.
Happy to second the recommendation.
Thank you.
And
Take
my
the
question is that council have, in the report, council staff in the report have indicated that this contract might, over the term of its life, have a value of $760,000. So I wish to understand how they arrived at the figure of $725,000.
Mr Lawson, do you need assistance from Mr Finlayson?
Through you, Mr Mayor. No, that should be fine. Yeah, look, apologies, there was a mistake within that recommendation. So the 725 actually should be 540K contract value. How that's been calculated is that assuming the 4 companies on the panel get equal amount of work, the figures are calculated and divided by 4 to give the 540K. So the 760 was originally historical costs. So what the panel contractors provided us is a really competitive result.
So while we're at 725, it was 540?
I need that motion, Mr Mayor, to, what was in that slide? 540,000, thank you.
So we're happy to amend the motion at this point to 540K, which has done its magic around here. Thank you. You comfortable with that, Councillor Vanderman?
Yeah, thank you.
So, okay, just another question while we're going, Councillor Vanderman, before we open debate. Councillor Glacken?
Thank you. With Councillor Vanderman's question in mind, 725,000 is also listed further up on that page. So both amounts are incorrect.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, they are. Sorry. Yeah.
So both amounts should be $540. 540,000. Thank you.
Let the record show we've
Okay.
amended every amount to 540K for the remainder of the evening. Councillor Vanderman, did you wish to open debate on that?
No, thank you, Mr Mayor.
No question on debate. Happy to put the motion. All those in favour? The motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. We have 13.12, which is the development application. Thank you, councillors. Councillor Glacken.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Through you to move the recommendation as a motion that Council A, receive and note the contents of this report, and B, grant development consent to development application 10.2019.37011.1 for an industrial building administration office, car parking and signage at part lot 17 in DP 1123667, addressed to 68 Merkel Street, Thagoona, subject to conditions contained in the draft determination included in the report at attachment 3.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley.
I'll second the motion, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Glacken, do you wish to open debate?
No, I believe this development application is fine. The report includes all the areas we need to consider. Thank you.
Thank you. There are no further questions or debate. Happy to put the motion as a division. All those in favour? Councillor Stutchbury, Councillor Doxey, Councillor Clement, Councillor Matt, Councillor Conn, Councillor Glacken, Councillor Thurley and Councillor Vanderman. The motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. 14, Officers' Reports for Noting. 14.1, the Monthly Development Statistics, 2019, August. Councillor Thurley.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I move the Council receive and note the information in the Monthly Development Statistics Report for August 2019.
Thank you. Seconder, please. Councillor Stutchbury.
Second that, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Thurley, you wish to speak to that report?
No, thank you, Mr Mayor.
On that note, I'll put the report. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. 14.2, the investment balances for August 2019. Councillor Vanderman.
Happy to move that Council receive and note the investment balances report for the month of August 2019.
Thank you. Councillor Doxey.
Happy to second, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Vanderman, do you wish to open debate?
No, thank you, except to note that the balance has gone up considerably, and I presume it's for the funds that have been contributed to us via that loan that we did the documents and sealing before.
Not as yet, no.
No, not
Mr Finlayson?
Through you, Mr Mayor, thanks for the question. No, not as yet. Part of that loan was drawn down in June, just gone. Part will be drawn down in the future to align with the program of works. The month of August more aligns with other income, such as from rate notices and the like.
Okay, thank you. So you're happy to put the motion,
Yeah,
Councillor
thank you,
Vanderman?
Mr Mayor.
Happy to put that motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. 14.3, the corporate health indicators for June 2019. Councillor Thurley.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I move that Council receive and note the June 2019 Corporate Health Indicators Report.
Thank you. Councillor Doxey.
Happy to second, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley, do you wish to speak to that?
Just to note with pleasure, the work and safety statistics are once again good, and a really pleasing report.
Thank you. No further question or debate. Happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. 14.4, the June quarter budget review. Thank you. Councillor Thurley.
I move that Council receive and note the analysis of Albury City's financial performance for the 2018-19 financial year compared to forecast.
Thank you. Councillor Doxey.
Happy to second, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley, just to speak to that.
I thank you, Mr Mayor.
Is there further no question or debate? Happy to put that motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. We have no delegates' reports for noting. We have notice of urgent business. We have two, I believe. And the first one is Councillor Vandervan.
Just requesting an urgent update on the development in Pemberton Street regarding the stop work on that particular development. And the second one, which I would like to add now if it's possible, I find that it's either myself that can't use the what do they call it? Docks on tap, or it's it needs to have an alternative to docks on tap available because it's clunky and unwieldy.
Thank you. I'll take that one for second. Mr Christie, the Pemberton Street update.
Yep, and thank you for the question and for you, Mr Mayor. So in regards to the Pemberton Street site, the application modification that I gave an update to on the council workshop is still awaiting information. What we are doing from staff at this stage is we have identified some concerns with the submitted information, and so we are seeking an independent survey of the site. Now, in regards to works that occurred on the site, some of the councillors may have been contacted about. Council's undertaking some works in Enid Lane, being a reconstruction of Enid Lane, and some drainage works, and that required us to do some works at the entrance to the property at 656 Pemberton Street. So it wasn't a breach of the stop work order, because the stop work order covers the works approved under the development consent and construction certificate. The works were undertaken by council under our own construction certificate related to the reconstruction of Enid Lane.
Comfortable with that?
Thank you.
And your second question, who's putting their hand up there to answer the docks on tap? Ms Squire.
Through you, Mr Mayor. Thanks for the feedback, Councillor Vandervan. I'm happy to take it on notice and discuss options, given that we have had feedback from a number of councillors about the effectiveness of it. Obviously, transitioning to an alternate system would require full investigation and consideration, but we're happy to take on board your concerns and work with you, Councillor Vandervan, to try and make sure it's as effective as possible until we consider any alternate options.
Did you have a follow-up, Councillor Vandervan? You look
Yeah,
like you're eagerly
Councillor
anticipating.
Glacken just helped me fix the problem I had. When I plugged in the power cord, it went blank from page 91 onwards, and I removed the power cord, it came back. Now, to me, that's just a really silly...
It's when it's on power.
I mean, I just... But my issues around trying to read the minutes... Mr Mayor, if I may, my issue is around trying to read the council meeting agenda and then having to go to another screen to get the attachment and then having to reopen the council minutes. It's just totally clunky and impossible to use efficiently. Thank you.
And Mr Zachnich has assured me that there'll be a full review.
Thank you.
And the matter will be taken. Did you say ICAT? No.
No.
Okay. The second item, Councillor Con.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. On a much lighter note, I had the pleasure of attending a concert this morning that was put on by the residents of Estia Health in Thurgoona and students from Tabletop Public School. This was a project that was funded by an AlburyCity Community and Cultural Grant and facilitated by a group called Breaking New Ground Learning. The public school students visited the nursing home fortnightly for a term. The result was a really astounding benefit for both residents and students, and the representatives of the school and the nursing home wanted me to pass on their appreciation to council for funding that project. They've actually produced a book with some photos and some stories written by the students, and I'll put that in the councillor office if anyone wants to have a look.
Thank you, Councillor Con. I have one question probably to Mr Armstrong. in relation to where we're at with Noriel Park. Is that a commercial and confidence issue, or can we ask that question where we're at with the lease agreement? Just an update for the group. Yeah, the Noriel Park Oval, yeah.
Yeah, thank you for the question, and through you, Mr Mayor. We're still just going through the details of the co-user agreement. The intention is to get a report to our executive leadership group in the next couple of weeks, and it's scheduled to come to council at the end of October, I think the 28th, the report, so hopefully get it all signed off by then.
So all parties are playing well in the sandpit?
Yes, they are. We're still working through the nuances of the details of some of the user groups, but we've all had conversations with the three groups, yes.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr Armstrong. Okay, so we have no confidential matters. The meeting is closed at 7:41. Thank you, Council.